Welcome to Unsilent with your hosts Dave and Brian. This is not another current events podcast. We're digging deeper, diagnosing, and discussing what's really going on today, how we got here, and providing observations for future generations.
Welcome to Unsilent. We're Brian and Dave. We're hoping you'll let us know where you think we got it right and where we completely missed the point, which you can do by visiting unsilentpodcast.com. Let's get into it. So, Brian, what are we going to talk about today? I think we're going to continue from our last week's conversation.
Yeah, I think, we're kind of delving into this, how religion and society and governance all kind of work. And I don't think we're going to get through that quickly. It's probably going to be a multi-faceted conversation. So we'll kind of pick up where we left off. Real quick before we do, as Dave mentioned, you can go to unsilentpodcast.com. We'd love for you to tell us, we say like where we got it wrong. Like we're trying to explain to somebody, 70 years from now, what this moment in time feels like. And if we say something that you disagree with, we'd love to hear you chime in. If you have a different way of explaining what it feels like for you, we'd love to hear that. And you can do that. Like you said, go to unsilentpodcast.com. You can also go to rumble.com. And starting this week, the link to our Rumble channel is right in the podcast notes. So if you're listening on audio and you want to watch the video or you want an easy place to comment, the link is going to be right in the show notes. You can easily do that. Also, just kind of catch people up who weren't here last week with us. A couple of things that we decided that I think would be helpful is Dave and I kind of tossed around a couple of different things, and one of the things we came up with kind of a workable definition of religion for the purposes of our conversation, which I'll get to in a second. I think it's important to note that we pointed out that not all religions are, what do you call them? Theistic or
theistic? Yeah, they don't all depend. Not all religions depend on the supernatural.
Right. So you don't have to have a supernatural. You don't have to have intelligent design to have a religion. And as we've defined it, and I'll get to that in a second, that certainly is true. We also kind of came to the conclusion that as it relates to societies and religion and government, how they are all kind of intertwined, there's not a wide variety of options. You either have a god king, like we knew in Europe in the 1700s and 1400s and 700s and whatever. And we also kind of see now in places like North Korea and China, where the emperor or whoever's in charge kind of is seen as a deity and is very autocratic, to say the least. Or it might be a Politburo, and they're seen as the ones who make all the decisions, but that they would have more of a not supernatural, but superhuman impact on people's lives, right. I guess you could say, maybe.
Right.
Or you have the people, the societies and countries, like the example I used last week was Anguilla. You could also look at places like Switzerland, where they're just relying upon everyone's good nature not to invade them, and they're just very passive in things, and they don't but you can't scale that, and right. you can't conquer anybody doing it that way, right. For sure. And I think it'd be a little naive, as you and I have talked about before, that if everyone tried to be that, somebody wouldn't, and the country who wouldn't be that way would just conquer everybody else. So right, that's exactly. Not likely to be how it works out. So what Dave and I came up with, and I started out with this, and then Dave added a couple of really good points. That just religion, as we define it, is a collection of beliefs, customs, norms, values, with embraced, tolerated, and rejected behaviors centered around an explanation of our existence, our purpose, what happens when we die, and has a definition of evil.
Right.
And the explanation part of like the beginning and the end, that seems kind of binary. Either you believe in intelligent design or you don't. I think that one of the things that is the most fascinating about this moment in time in the last few years for me is watching people who are atheistic, cling to science to explain all kinds of things, now moving to this what's it called, the video game theory. What's it called? What's the thing?
That we're actually that they're actually in a simulation. Do we actually live in a
theory?
Simulation?
Yes, that's what it is. So
yeah, exactly.
They're now promoting this simulation theory as a way to explain things, which sounds to me like it would be intelligent design. You would have to have somebody create the simulation,
right?
But the way they're presenting it is like this is not a supernatural being. It's just more a more evolved us.
Right.
They're like dancing around this thing. It's
Well,
like,
you kick the can down the road.
yeah,
It doesn't give any explanation. It's just like we can't explain it, so the aliens did it.
right. So the beginning and the end feels pretty binary. You either believe in supernatural intelligent design or you don't. That's part. But the part that I think is causing the excruciating discomfort for you and I right now is this definition of evil, which
Yeah,
I think we really need to dive into. And I'm going to ask you a couple things like how you're seeing that. But
sure.
one of the just like super easy examples that jumped out to me a few weeks ago or episodes ago, you and I were talking about in the late 1930s, there was like literally Nazis marching in New York City. They had a gathering in like Madison Square Garden in 1939, I
Yeah,
think. And of course, people were like appalled and like, what in the world's happening? This is ridiculous. But we held true to our value of having free speech, and we
yeah,
basically said like, as a society, we basically said, yeah, it's gross. We wouldn't want our kids hanging around them. But they have the right to free speech, and that right really matters to us.
yeah.
And back then, our definition of evil was such that a pedophile would be put in prison,
Hmm.
but these people who were saying heinous things could say what they wanted to say.
Right.
As long as they weren't harming anybody, you can say what you want to say. We really value the freedom of speech.
Exactly.
Now, that's completely inversed. The pedophile is doing gross things, and wouldn't want our kids hanging around them, but we're not going to put them in prison. But
Yeah.
the Nazi, for saying bad things, they have to be locked away.
Yeah.
And
Or anybody who says a societally unacceptable thing has to be excommunicated from society. So might not even be the Nazi, might just be the person
yeah,
who says we think that maybe babies are babies before they're born, and that's a
right.
heinous crime.
Yeah. So Dave, how have you seen, like I give an example here, like the pedophile versus the Nazi in 1939, that's completely inverse now. Like if you had the
Right.
people who are at the, had the controls of power, if they had unfettered ability to do what they wanted, there's no question that the pedophile would go free and the Nazi would be in prison. And the Nazi, by their definition, not the old definition, by their new
Right.
definition,
A new
a quote
definition.
unquote Nazi would be put in prison, which could be somebody who just is guilty, like you said, of like quoting quote unquote misinformation, which could be something from the government's own website, just put in a
Yeah,
context that they don't like.
or it could be the Bible, or it could be
Right.
some accepted Western work or something like that. So I mean, really, what we've come to is a place where we have what I would call an alternative religion, sort of so humanism is essentially a religion, the exaltation of human feelings above everything else. And
Yeah.
so the way our society has evolved, if you will, is to put humanist values. In other words, whatever you feel, we don't call them pedophiles anymore. We call them minor attracted adults, right? So
Yeah.
we've elevated the human feelings above objective standards. So most supernatural religions, whether you take Judaism or Islam or Christianity, or you can take the Abrahamic religions, or most religions have some sort of objective standard that says here is right and here is wrong. This is bad. This is good. Whereas the more humanistic approach to that says, if this is has its roots in the '60s, if it feels good, do it. Whatever you
Yeah.
feel is good, it's okay.
Sex, drugs, and rock and roll, baby. Let's do it.
Let's go. I mean, Woodstock. Let's go to Woodstock, right?
Yeah.
So and really this alternative that we're presented with in our society today is that exaltation of every human feeling, every human impulse, every human desire, every human emotion above any sort of objective restriction on that. So, in most religions have a moral code. And in that moral code, it doesn't matter who you are or what you feel. This behavior is a bad behavior, and you shouldn't do it. Whereas the opposite exists to a great extent if the sort of humanist religion was the religion of the society unfettered, then that's what you get to. You get to minor attracted adults instead of pedophiles. You get to, where women, there's no such thing as a woman. If you feel like you're a woman, you're a woman. There's no objective,
Right.
scientific basis of
Yeah,
that
chromosomes
definition.
are no longer XX and XY. That's out.
Yeah,
That's
biology is
old
bigotry.
school thinking.
Biology is bigotry, right? So, and therefore,
Catchy. We should get that URL before it's taken. Like we
well,
could
I,
make some
I
real
I didn't
cash.
make that one up. I got
Oh,
that one from
dang
somebody
it.
else, but it's a good
We had
one.
our
Yeah.
chance.
It's yeah, but it really is. It really is, and this is the fascinating thing, because oftentimes in our society we're told that religion and science are at odds with one another. That there's scientific fact, and then there's religion, and it's faith versus fact. And the reality is that the lack of religion has brought a lack of objective reality. So the objective reality of, as we're just talking about, a man is a biological entity and a woman is a biological entity, that is a scientific fact. It's an objective reality. Whereas
Yeah.
the humanist religion throws away objective reality in favor of in favor of feelings, in favor. My truth is what I feel. So your truth
Yeah.
might be gravity, Brian. My truth is not gravity. I can fly. That's an
Right.
absurd example, and there's plenty of
Yeah.
absurd examples to show why this is untrue. But that's really the irony of this idea that religion and science are at odds with one another, because one is factual and one is faith based.
Well, and I would just say that, again, going back to how we've defined religion, the behaviors you're describing is somebody who believes in a religion. Now, again, it's an atheistic religion.
Yes.
But when we talk about it's a set of customs, norms, beliefs, aka faith,
Right.
values, that kind of stuff. If you're in a let's just use Christianity, because the country was more or less founded on Christian beliefs, right? If you have a Christian outlook on life, and I don't mean like a practicing, you go to church 3 times a week. I don't mean that. I mean like you generally accept Christian values,
Right.
which in 1939 I would argue that most people in our country did.
Right.
Or traditional Judeo-Christian values, what we've talked about a lot, or I've said a lot on here. So back then, the predominantly that's what people had. They had faith in something bigger than them.
Right.
Well, the person you're describing who says biology is bigotry, they still have faith. They just put their faith in another person or a government entity or a bureaucracy or a they greater than them.
Right.
That is telling them, and they should have faith in what that entity or person or group of people says. That disregard what your 7th grade science teacher told you about XX chromosomes.
Right.
That's all nonsense. Of course you can be a woman and have children if you just decide that you want to and you were born a man. Of course that's how it goes. Of course the guy who was a man 6 days ago, or 6 months ago, when he buys tampons, of course it's the same as a biologically born woman. Like, of course it's the same. It's like that's you and I look at that as nonsense. They have faith in a thing, and so that's why I say that's no less a religion than the person who goes to church every Sunday and believes in Jesus Christ.
Right. Well, and in reality, they're in some cases, it's not even a faith of something outside themselves. It's a faith that whatever they feel is the ultimate truth.
Yes.
So they become God. So if I feel it,
Right.
it's true because I feel it. So feelings become God, as opposed to any kind of objective, outward. Here's where the world came from. Here's these explanations for origin, destiny, and the reality of evil. So it's again, it's, if it feels good, do it. That becomes God, as opposed to anything that would constrain me. And it's fascinating too. If you look at the current sort of societal angst that we go through, much of it ends up being around sexuality. So,
Right.
so the ultimate, you can say as a human being that strongest drives that we have are often sexual drives, and this is then what becomes the motivating factor around a lot of the societal controversies, and the reason that a lot of the societal controversies say that traditional religions that restrict potentially certain sexual activities or certain proclivities, shall we say, would be viewed as the enemy.
Right. And when you and I were talking, or like when I read, we started off last week with me kind of reading a definition I came up with. I didn't look up in a dictionary. I just kind of thought about it. Like, here's a definition that I would come up with. I talked about like there are embraced, tolerated, and rejected behaviors, three
Yes.
different categories of behaviors. Again, the Judeo-Christian in 1939 would look at that sexual activity you're talking about and reject that, or at least
Right.
say it's not acceptable. Like,
Right.
people are people and they do things that we don't like, and we're
Right.
all human and we make mistakes, et
Yep.
cetera, et cetera. But that's not the ideal. And now people look at your minor attracted adult, which of all the things that have come around in language over the last few years, that may be the one that just pisses me off the most.
It's
But
insane.
whatever.
Yeah.
Now the restricted behavior is us doing something to stop that.
Yeah.
We restrict the behavior of saying you're a douche for doing that, to say the least. Like, stop doing that.
And not only restricting that, but thinking that it's wrong. So
Yeah.
sin in the past has been, in most religions, has been doing something wrong. In the New Testament, where there's a lot of, you need to control your mind because your mind
Right.
can lead you into sin as well. But then that the exact sort of mirror image of that, the doppelganger of that, exists in society now, where if you say, well, the minor attracted person is got some mental illness problems, well, now you are a sinner for saying that, for disapproving of the minor attraction, or whatever it happens to be. Or if you say that there is an objective reality that defines men and women, now you, for saying that, are a sinner. You can't, it's thought crimes. You can't think these things without falling into their definition of evil.
And that same person, though, would likely, again, I'm speaking in generalities here, so don't email me, whoever, and like, I know a person that's not like that. There's exceptions to everything. But generally speaking, that person who would say it's a sin to think poorly of that minor attracted person would not have any problem thinking harshly of a Bible thumping, going to church Christian.
Right.
Like, no problem with that. Like, that person is okay to criticize. That person is okay to judge harshly. That person is okay to say that their behavior is wrong because their religion is different than mine. And this is one of the things I think really we talked about last week briefly, and but really matters is it's important for us to understand, I think, that not all religions require a God.
Right.
And just because you're atheist doesn't mean you don't have a religion. You have faith, you have customs, you have norms, you have accepted and rejected behaviors. You have a definition of evil, which, by the way, would probably be that practicing Christian today. That would be a person who fits in the classification of evil.
Exactly. A competing religion. Religions have always been competing against one another. The great competition of the last couple thousand years has been Islam. It's been among the Abrahamic religions: Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. So you had Islam competing with Christianity, pushing into Europe, and Europe pushing back with the Crusades. And so there's been these competing religions, and now, however, the competing religion really is this, what I would call humanism versus standards-based, religious societal outlook. But you're right. It's no less a religion because it has the components of standard religion. It has a set of beliefs. It has doctrines. If you violate those doctrines, you are a sinner. So the minor attracted
or a
activist,
bigot. They might call you a bigot, not a sinner.
Yeah, which is different language, same thing, right? So you're a bigot, and so therefore you're a sinner. It has excommunication. There's the whole cancel culture thing that we talk about. So no, you can't be. We're not going to take you over to the Spanish Inquisition and pull your fingernails out, but we're certainly going to cancel your job or make sure your advertisers all go away or whatever. So it has all those same components.
Well, I wouldn't jump to conclusions yet, Dave. I think that in the next 5 years we might see fingernail pulling.
Too optimistic, I know.
And I think that the one of the things that I see as ironic is I agree with everything you just said. This is just a different religion.
Yeah.
And the people who have this particular religion see themselves as superior to those who have traditional Judeo Christian religions,
Sure.
like biblical kind of
Sure.
religions, which goes right back to the story of humankind is either your tribe did something to my tribe so bad that I have justification to do what I want, or I am superior to you and my tribe is superior to you for whatever reason. Could be God told me so, it could be I have a
Right.
better religion, and therefore it's okay for me to do what I want to you. This is exactly the same thing as the Muslims fighting the Jews. It's exactly the same thing as the Christians fighting the whoever in 127 AD.
Right.
It's exactly the same human behavior. These people with this new religion, as you and I have defined it, with a definition of evil, an explanation for where we come from, what happens when we die, and norms, faith, beliefs, values, they believe their religion is superior to ours, and
Right.
therefore they have justification to do whatever the hell they want to us.
Well, in this, if we want to put this even in the sort of modern international conflict arena, if you look at the nations like China and Russia and a number of other nations, like let's just take China versus America right now. The China doesn't view itself as a communist nation as being evil. The way that they view themselves is that who are you, Americans, to interfere with our internal affairs? They view
Right.
themselves as being what we do to the Uyghurs. It has nothing to do with you because the state is all. The state is the
Yeah.
religious entity. And since the state is all, you Americans who are saying that we're bad people because we're treating these people or those people, the other people wrong, you're bad people for thinking that because we're just doing what's necessary to
Yeah.
further our state religion. So they don't view, so
Yep.
we look at that and we think human rights, that's much more important than the advancement of the state. And the value is exactly, and that's what's likely to lead to another war. If there's war in Taiwan, it will be because of that, because they view this is our place. You have no right to interfere with, what they call Chinese Taipei. It's,
Yeah.
this is our place. And you are morally wrong, you Western countries, for imposing your values upon us. And they believe it just as
Right.
strongly as we believe that human rights are important. Two different
Yeah.
religions.
Yeah. And I think that's part of what, you know, I enjoy about doing this podcast, and the reason for it is, for me, is that these things all seem like the new thing. The people
Yeah,
who are saying, like, the Green New Deal is the way to go, and wind and solar energy should replace fossil fuels, and anti-racism is the cure for racism. Like, these people
right,
who say this stuff, their behavior is no different than the Romans trying
right,
to conquer the Celtics back in 47 BC or whatever it was.
right, right,
It's exactly the same behavior. My God and my religion are better than yours. Therefore,
right.
I can do whatever I want because you are the sinner, you are evil, you're the bigot, you're the whatever, fill in the blank,
Yeah.
and therefore I have justification to do what I want.
And it's also interesting that all of the belief systems are ultimately ancient belief systems. So if
Right.
we can look at pantheism, the idea that all is God and that nature is God, and that and we can think that, well, the current environmental, climate change, Green New Deal, all of that, it's all brand new, it's all science based. There's always been religion that has been based around this idea of Mother Earth, Gaia is
Right.
in, we have to protect. And so there's a religious element to that. There's plenty of people in that particular religious bent, what I would call the Green New Deal religion, who would say, well, and they say this, they say that well, humans, we're a blight upon the earth, and earth will be much better off when we're all gone. And whereas the more traditional, Judeo-Christian, Islamic, etc., religions say that no, human beings are the pinnacle of creation and are over creation. So there's two competing religions even there. So it
Yeah.
doesn't, and they're all, every one of these is ancient, has been around for time immemorial, for thousands upon thousands of years, and the conflicts just kind of get relabeled. And it's kind of like it's kind of like when I came home and one day and my kids are wearing bell bottoms. I said, "You're wearing bell bottoms?" "No, Dad, these are called flares." We just
Flares,
rename
right?
old things into new
Yeah,
things. And how dare you
yeah,
call this? The Greta Van Thunberg would say, "No, you can't call me a religious person. What are you talking about? This is all brand new. It's all science based." It's just a rehash of things that have happened over and over and
yeah,
over again.
yeah. No, I agree. And that's the part that is I think at the root of a lot of this stuff. When we talk about changing values and how we
Right,
went from 1939, you could be a Nazi marching and people would like think you're the worst kind of person possible,
right,
but we're not putting you in prison. We are locking away the pedophiles, and now that's completely inverted. We
right.
just hope our kids stay away from the pedophiles. It's kind of gross, but we don't want to. We're not going to lock them away like that. It's 180 degrees, but that's likely the way it's always been. Is the grass is always
Yeah,
greener. We talked about this last week. The grass is always greener, and we always want to dominate others.
right.
And
Now,
therefore, we're going to use only four ways to do that. Either we agree coming out of the gate with how things should go.
yeah,
I'm going to try to convince you. I'm going to try to trick you, or I will force you.
I'll
That's the
force you.
only four ways I get you to do what I want.
Now, the one of the things I think is important to say in this conversation too is how well everything we've said is an accurate description of where things are at. I think it's also important to say that there are certain things that are objectively, I mean, if you value objective reality, there are objectively
Yeah.
better than other things, and so therefore,
I've heard that that's going out in 2024, but in 2023, there's still some of us that are okay
well,
with
for
it.
for now, maybe there's a few objective things still left. So,
Yeah.
eventually, when you violate the laws of the universe for too long, or the laws of human nature for too long, or the laws of science, or the laws of
Right.
sociology, and there is a way that the universe actually does work, and so therefore, and this is one of the things that could get me locked away. All religions are not equal as a result of that,
Yeah.
because some ideas are just really bad ideas. It turns out
Yeah.
that you cannot deny that one of the fundamental ways that humanity keeps going is because men and women get together and they have kids and they raise them together. It turns
Right.
out that that kind of arrangement perpetuates the race, and an
Yeah.
arrangement that eliminates that as a high value is a bad idea. So it's,
Yeah.
and I'm not saying that there's, everybody has to
Well,
do it exactly that way.
here's what I will say is the irony of this is Kenny G will look back at this and say, "What a bunch of morons." He won't know any of these people because they will have not reproduced. Like
Yes, that's
like
right.
they 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 literally like evolution will take care of this because the religious people, the traditional Judeo-Christian, you know, whatever what we used to call religious people
Yeah.
will procreate, and the new people with the new religion who are getting gender reassignments, things like that, will not procreate, and therefore they won't have offspring.
It's sort
That's
of
the great
Darwinian.
irony of this.
It's kind of Darwinian, isn't it? Survival of the fittest, so to speak.
Well,
Well,
I wouldn't. You know, I I don't know. Is Darwin? Are we still allowed to say Darwin is? He's probably okay, right? Because he was kind of anti-religion, wasn't he?
well, Darwin just didn't have enough information to really make
Okay.
enough of a
Yeah.
conclusion about his idea, about
Yeah.
his theories. But the
So
other
I guess they might argue that we will evolve and people will be born with both sets of genitalia, and when you turn 16 or whatever, you can choose which one you lop off and which one you keep.
Well, see, there you go. I was about to say that maybe in the future this whole procreation thing will be passe and kind of gross. I read sci-fi novels about that, and everybody will be born out of a lab in a dish, and you'll go in and you'll say,
Man,
"I
that
want one
that
with red
that really
hair and
sounds
blue
utopian.
eyes."
I'm really excited for that. I mean, I hope food has no taste also, and
Yeah,
like, you
right,
know, transportation is just beaming from one place to another where you can't enjoy the drive.
right.
Like let's just be more efficient and take the fun out of everything.
Yeah, exactly. That's an efficient life.
So when we talk about values changing, this is the kind of stuff we're talking about. We're not talking
Right,
about um, simple things, and that's part of again putting ourselves in the space of kind of a Anne Frank during World War II, hiding in the attic for however many years. I don't
right.
remember the story well enough to know how many years it was, but chronicling what the moment is like, and for me as being a person who was really harsh on those people, like how could you be the person who lived next to Auschwitz and never speak up? And now going through a version of this, we're not to a point where it's anywhere near as bad as that for sure yet. I think that the likelihood is we will, because there's nothing else. There's nothing to stop this other than enough people revolting, and when that happens, there will be conflict. I don't see a path that doesn't involve some version of that.
Right.
But part of what I hope Kenny G understands as he looks back on our era, and probably would benefit me to look back on Anne Frank's era and the people who lived next to Auschwitz, is just how overwhelming this is. Like, this is not only is it a massive shift. Like, when I talk about like the Nazi and the pedophile, like that is a shift that if you would have told me in 2011, like, hey, this is what's going to be like, I'd be like, there's no way. We would have maybe joked about it, like, yeah, these guys are a bunch of morons. Yeah, they probably would like that, but it would not have would not be a sense of reality to that. It would just be like, not like, okay, nobody's going to push it that far. Nobody's going to go that far. Like, that's crazy. But that is what it is. And not only is it that crazy, but you're the idiot and you're the bigot and you're the sinner. You're the whatever explanation or descriptor you want to use. You're the problem.
Right. Well, in part of this, I think part of what happens, part of why this occurs at this particular societal moment, is because when a society becomes so successful and affluent that it can detach its behaviors and beliefs from what caused it to be successful as it is, then you get a whole variety of new ideas. You get, there's just all the various and sundry things that we look at when we look at these things, and we think it makes no sense. It's illogical. It's irrational. It's dumb, because can't you see that the natural outcome of this way of thinking, of this way of believing that the world is going to lead to the destruction of the way of life that allowed you to believe this thing in the first place. So, I think one of the things from Kenny G's perspective is when a society, and this goes to other discussions we've had, when a society gets to the point where it's so successful that there's virtually no consequences for the entire society shifting to believe things that would have never allowed the society to come to be in the first place, then you're on the cusp of a major disaster, major societal disaster. So if in this society, we cannot continue as we are with, you might call traditionalists and whatever you call the lump of everybody else.
Yeah, we'll have to come up with a catchy new phrase for the new religion.
Yeah, no, we can't call them deplorables because somebody used that before.
So that's taken. Yeah, deplorables.com is probably taken. So we'll have to come up with some other. I mean, whatever we get, we have to be able to get the URL. That's the rule.
That's
so
right.
we'll have to figure something out.
So that's really the you think, well, why have all these rather bizarre things arisen? And that's really why, because of our own success has allowed people to believe and behave things in certain such ways that we never could have done that 100 years ago and survived till today. And so there will be a reset. I mean, so there will be some kind of, this will come to fruition, and there will be a focusing moment when you can't think in these weird ways anymore and still survive.
Yeah, I wonder about that. I don't disagree. As I'm thinking through again, using Nazi Germany as the parallel, and imagining that very much like what you and I are experiencing today, there came a point where if you didn't agree with putting Jews in, like taking their belongings, taking their everything they had and sending them away, you were the problem for not going along with that.
Right.
But what led to that for them was not affluence; it was the opposite. That their country collapsed.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if it isn't just a function of a colossal, the grass is always greener. We always have to be thinking of what we don't have. We're rewarded in economic terms and influential terms on coming up with the new greatest thing.
Yeah.
And so at some point that reaches a point of absurdity where the things that we want that we don't have are like, they're kind of silly. But in our case, like to be the influencer nobody's okay. So to put things in perspective for Kenny G, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, people would go to webinars. They would go to an online class that was an hour long to learn how to do a thing, how to build a website, how to write in business terms, like how to write an ad for an email that you're going to send out, or whatever. It could be how to bake cupcakes, whatever. Like there's, and you would get people to go to those classes by selling them on this new great idea you have that's going to make their lives better. Well,
Right.
at some point, the new great idea has to be the problems are solved. So you have to create new problems to solve that people aren't aware
Sure.
exist, in which to be the influencer
Yeah.
and the problem solver and the person who has this vast wealth of knowledge and this super smart person
Yeah.
who everybody should listen to. You have to help them understand they have problems they didn't really understand, which in some cases might not actually be legit problems. You might have to conjure things up that aren't really
Right.
there.
Well, that's a good point. See, that's a very good point, because I think one of the components that always happens in all of these scenarios is, whether it's in an affluent society or whether it's in a desperate society like the Weimar Republic was in Germany after
Yeah.
World War One, is you come up with somebody to blame for your troubles. And
Yeah.
even if you have no troubles, so the United States, there's no perfect society, but we live currently in still the most affluent, I mean, even homeless folks they're in terrible situation, not to downplay that at all, but they have cell phones with more information on them than the kings of the earth could have gotten 100 years ago. So we're in a situation where we're objectively better off en masse as a country than any other country in the history of humanity, and still
Yeah.
we need somebody to blame. So
Right.
and the
I
religion
think that
helps that.
early on, you and I talked about this. Like, to get where we are, there had to be a boogeyman. There had
Yeah.
to be a
Yeah.
scapegoat.
Right.
And I think that does tie into this religious piece that you and I talking about, where again, not a theistic religion exclusively,
Right.
but religions have a definition of evil, aka the boogeyman.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you have one that people either agree with, can be convinced is correct, can be tricked to believe is correct, or can
Yeah.
be forced to believe is correct, you have the necessary components to do the thing you want to do, which is take control. So
Yeah.
whether it's a fascist government like we saw in Nazi Germany after the Weimar Republic fell apart,
Right.
or it's other communism, it doesn't matter. You have in Red China, they had the traditional old ways was the boogeyman or whatever.
Right.
The old people, in many societies, it's the ultra wealthy who are the problems,
Right.
or the boogeyman. And all you need is people to buy into that, and that solves your definition of evil problem.
Right.
And it is a religion that takes over, maybe not just a God-centric religion.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Well, and that's also why I think that goes to the point that that human beings are necessarily, we're just this way. You can say we're designed this way, or we evolved this way, whatever you want to believe.
Yeah.
But we are necessarily religious creatures. We always have that need for that basic framework, that basic paradigm, that basic worldview that defines those things. And so whether you're in a collapsing society or whether you're in a hugely affluent society, you've got these things that are going to come up, and they may or may not be grounded in reality. So a lot of what is happening now is not grounded in reality. A lot of what's happened in a lot of these, that Confucius was, according to Mao, a very bad guy. He was not. Now they're trying to rehabilitate him in China now. She is, but they will find somebody and something to blame, and it usually is going to be something that has perceived power. So in Nazi Germany, the Jews were perceived to be the wealthy, the money grabbers, and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
So that's
they
what we
tricked
have.
you out of your money because they had the banks and they had the successful businesses, and that
Right.
there's no way that was natural. They must have been up to shenanigans
They
to be
must have
that
been
successful.
cheating. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, exactly. And so that in every one of those scenarios, it's that religious paradigm playing out again. And the challenge for society is to find one that helps perpetuate the society, that's closest to reality. I mean, I think this is why, for me, it's important for me to continue to examine my religion to see does it comport with the way that the universe is created? Does it make
Yeah.
sense? Is it or is it, or the components of it that are just this kind of human base level behavior that I got to avoid?
Speaking of human base level behavior, when you were talking about the things that we want, I just kept thinking you're describing a toddler. We want freedom and
Yes.
we want freedom. We want to be taken care of,
Right. Yep.
right? And we want to control things like you're describing you're describing the terrible twos.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
describing a preschooler like we tantrum, we don't get our way.
Yep.
And we want the freedom to make mistakes without consequences, and we want to know we're taken care of. Like no matter what we do, somebody's gonna love us in the end. Like whether it's God
Yep.
or Mother Earth or will be remembered as being the smart people who revolutionized the way fossil fuels are used, or
Right. Well, and
it's
so
all the same
what you're really
nonsense.
saying, Brian, is we never grow out of our toddler years.
What?
Fundamentally,
Yeah,
we never grow
100
out as a
100%.
society of our toddler years, because those
In
needs are
a
there.
in a collective sense, a macro sense, and a individual sense, yes,
Yeah.
I am saying that we are all fighting collectively and individually our inner toddler. 100%.
Well,
I'm saying that.
and so that then goes to the need for societies to be healthy, to have a healthy religion.
Yeah.
I mean,
What I was when you were talking about this earlier, I'm glad you said that because it reminded me of this, and that is the word balance keeps coming to mind for me.
sure.
Right? Like you said last week, like you would not want to live in a society that was a hardline Christian
Theocracy.
theocratic or theologic driven government.
Right.
Like that would be out of balance. Like
Right.
it would be too much of a good thing, you might argue, or some would argue it'd be too much of a good thing, right? um, just like I wouldn't want to live in Syria,
Right.
where or places where they have a hard fisted or hard heavy handed approach to Islam. Now,
Right.
does that mean all Islam is bad? No, absolutely not.
Right.
There's people who are fantastic, wonderful, loving,
Absolutely.
caring
Absolutely.
people who do wonderful things with their lives, who believe in that faith, in that
Right.
religion.
Yep.
There's always too much of a good thing. Again, all these great ideas have been around for thousands of years. This is one of them.
Exactly.
And I think this is where we talked about, like, one is the definition of evil that has changed, and we've talked about that. But the other is how we deal with people that do not comply with our norms, our customs, our whatever. And like we
Right.
said last week, no matter what society you create, with 350 million people, somebody is going to be out. If
Yeah.
you have a society where being straight and going to church is the norm, then gay people who don't go to church are going to be out to some degree.
Yeah.
Now, the question then is, how do you treat those people? Do you imprison them? Do you cancel them? Do you make it so they can't get jobs? Well, I guess in some extreme cases that probably did happen,
Yeah.
but
Oh,
that
yeah.
was generally frowned upon.
Yeah.
It was not the norm of the culture to accept that. Now what we're seeing is the heavy-handed religion, where if you are not in the in crowd, if you are the person who goes to church and you are the person who believes that a man is a man and a woman is a woman, and the family unit matters more than the career and things like that,
Right.
you are the one who's out in this new religion, and there will be heavy consequences for you. You better get your shit together and get on board, or else.
That's right.
And it's not the same as it was in 1943 Mississippi, where
Right.
it happened in the cloak of night and things like that, and people wore hoods and stuff. These are the most influential, outspoken public people saying this.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think it comes. I think that's where there are certain things that humans have as base motivations. I think most people meeting a new person are generally, unless they've been taught otherwise, are generally not ready to condemn them straight up. There's some teaching that goes into that. There's some. I mean, it's certainly true that human beings tend to hang out with other human beings that are like them. That's why you see neighborhoods that tend to attract certain races. It's just people tend to hang out with people that look like them, because we're just that's just kind of the way we are.
You don't wear a biker outfit to a cowboy bar,
Yes,
and you don't wear a Speedo to a biker bar,
Right.
right? There, Yeah, you go where you fit in for sure.
But a good but this is where I think a good religion and a good society will ultimately, for its own benefit, will ultimately teach some level of tolerance for those that are the exception to the rule. So, in other words,
Yes.
a society that is, I mean, you know, and I suppose if you look, I suppose if you look at some of the theocratic, there are theocratic societies all throughout the Middle East. I mean,
Yeah.
where women are not treated
I think
well and have,
all but like 2 or 3 of them are, aren't they?
well,
Like
yeah, I
there's
mean,
only a handful of
Israel's
exceptions.
a democracy, and most of the Arab
Yeah.
nations are not, and not that they're all
Right.
treating everybody poorly, but there is to a great
I wouldn't want to
extent.
live there.
Oh, well, no, I wouldn't live there either. There, besides, it's too hot too. But
Yeah.
but if you think about it, you know, I suppose that the they would advance much more significantly, for instance, if women were full contributors. Because it turns out we've
Right.
learned, what do you know? We've learned here in the West that women have a lot to offer. Who knew? You
Yeah.
know, but and so if you look at the ultimate benefit to society over the long term, I would predict that at some point that, you know, women become more full members of those societies for the society's own good. In other words, the weight of what works will ultimately push them in a direction. So just like in a positive direction that is beneficial for society. That you could call you might think of that as Darwinianism. That, you know,
Yeah.
that societies try to improve themselves based on what does and does not work. So I would propose that that's the case, like with a lot of these. And no, it might take thousands of years, as it has for, you know, we lived under the divine right of kings in the West for, you know, thousands of years, and
Yeah.
that wasn't the way to take full advantage of the benefits that every societal member could offer. And when we started to do that, we got the United States. When we said, no, we're not going to have a king over here, George doesn't want to be king, we'll make him president,
Yeah.
and that'll be good enough. Then we over a period of time, we became the most powerful, prosperous nation in history, proving, I would say, that the sort of the religious outlook was a better religious outlook than had been previously tried.
Right. Yeah, I think that's the one of the harder parts to again, where I just kind of go back to we just always want what we don't have
Right,
is you were born in the wealthy neighborhood on the nicest house on the block, and you grow up and you hate your parents and you wish you
right,
lived in the ghetto.
right,
Like, you know, and by the way, for you to go to the ghetto, it means you're going to tear the house down, and all the people who like the house, tough shit, like you're going to lose your house because I've decided that we should live like people in the ghetto
right,
who don't, you know, do the things that are necessary to be successful or whatever. I decided we're going to tear the whole thing down because I'm a tantruming toddler.
right. Well, and isn't that why then the most successful religions are going to have a honest view of humanity, of the human
Yeah.
condition? You
Yeah.
know,
And again, I going back to a recurring theme is one of the things that keeps Judeo-Christian religious, again, not saying that they're like they go to church every week or whatever, not hardcore religion. I'm just saying like
right,
people who accept those values. The thing that keeps that in check is we believe we are the cause of most of our problems and our
right,
energy should be focused inward. Now, does that mean we're perfect with that? Absolutely not. We all, to my understanding, like acknowledge that we fail in that to a large
absolutely,
part.
right, yep,
But that's the guiding principle and value is I am the cause of most of my problems. My energy
right,
should be focused on fixing me, not they. And that's a dramatic difference. And that dramatic difference can be the difference between living in Syria right now and living
yep,
here right now.
exactly.
Right.
Yeah,
All
and I
right,
would
Dave.
propose the proofs in the pudding. That, you know, look at the success of the United States. That's what I
Yeah.
would
Well,
propose.
from Kenny G's perspective, the trajectory it seems to me is either China's going to take over the world and communism is going to prevail, Islam's going to take over the world and it's going to prevail. The me Gaia, however you say that, the
Yeah,
green Gaia religion that you and I are going to have to name will prevail,
right,
or traditional Judeo-Christian values is going to prevail.
right.
Again, they will all exist in Kenny G's time,
Sure,
but
absolutely.
one will emerge as having gotten through this tumultuous time we're in for sure.
Yep.
Yeah, better than the rest, I should say. Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, hey, that's it for this week. Don't forget, we'd love to hear your perspective. If we're describing something that you think is inaccurate, it's not quite how you see it, your experience is different, go to rumble.com, check out the videos are all posted there. There's a great, easy way for you to comment there in the comment section of that. By the way, you can also like and give those videos a thumbs up. You can share them. You can subscribe to the page. You can do all this stuff. It's Dave and Brian against the algorithm. That's how this works.
Yeah, exactly.
Is the more engagement, the more people we get to talk to, and the more feedback we get to, and the better we can tell our story to Kenny G. That's really what the point of this is. So please jump in and tell us where we got it right, where we got it wrong. You can do that at unsilentpodcast.com or on our Rumble channel. You can just search on there, Unsilent Podcast, and it comes right up. And with that, I think that's it for this week. Let me check my notes here and make sure I didn't forget anything. Nope, that's it. So until next time, this is Dave and Brian signing off.
See you next week.
Do you want to be Unsilent? Make your voice heard on our social media channels and share where you think we got it right or wrong. Go to unsilentpodcast.com for social links so you can join the discussion.